As we begin this program, guess what? The old coot said, "The future is bright as your faith." Remember that. The future is bright as your faith. Today, you're really honored to have back in our midst Michael Quinn Sullivan. You've heard him before. He is a dynamic speaker, but guess what? He's on the front lines fighting for freedom. And he is the president and CEO of Empower Texas, and his premier project is Texas for Fiscal Responsibility. He's defended that concept in court on several cases. He's known throughout the state as a real patriot, and we're honored that he would come today. He is a close friend of Joanne's. He and Joanne do a lot of things together in the battle for freedom for you and I. He is a former newspaper reporter. He worked on the Capitol Hill as a staffer. He has been a vice president of a think tank. He is an Eagle Scout. Cool. Michael and his wife have 3 children. So would you help me give Michael a great warm East Texas welcome? Michael, come forward. We're standing here waiting to hear from you. Take your time, but hurry. Thank you.
Sorry you got hooked up in traffic. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, it's great to be with you all today. And I guess somewhat appropriate that a cold, blustery, rainy day is the day that I speak. I tend to bring misery and doom wherever I go. So it's only appropriate that the weather so reflects that. There are 4 issues I want to know. Joanne told me I was supposed to come and talk about legislative priorities. And when Joanne tells me to do something, you do it, no matter what. I understand it. Even she's not here, I'm still scared of her. From a million miles away, I'm still scared of Joanne. So I want to talk about. I can say it. Joanne won't watch this. Is that what you're telling me? No, I don't believe that. I don't believe you. So there are 4 issues I want to spend a minute or two talking about in a moment. And there's certainly a broad number of issues that are important. I don't want to suggest the 4 issues I'm going to talk about, there are the only 4 things you should care about. Because in fact, I fear, I know in fact, that too many of us have spent too much time being captive to low expectations. And that we approach governing sessions of the Texas legislature, of Congress, of our city council, of wherever it may be, and say, well, maybe we can get 1 or 2 things done. Maybe if we ask real nice, they'll do this one thing that we think is kind of important. That's the wrong attitude, particularly after last Tuesday, where today I would submit to you the clock is ticking. Republicans have now less than 2 years to exceed our expectations.
That's right.
They have less than 2 years to exceed our expectations in governing correctly. Because there are no more excuses. No more excuses. Because, for the past 8 years, we in Texas have been told, well, we would love in Texas to do this thing. And I'll talk about one of those things. But, you got Obama in the White House. Before Obama in the White House, we were told, well, the Bush administration might do it, but, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. Well, as of a week ago, Republicans have the White House, have the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House. In Texas, Republicans have the governorship, lieutenant governorship, the Senate, the House. Every statewide office is Republican. There's literally nothing. Yeah, well, you are applauding, but maybe you don't want to be applauding. Because who will they blame when everything you want done isn't done? Because understand this, in Texas anyway, I can't speak for those weirdos in the swamp in Washington, D.C., but I can certainly speak to Texas, where we have had complete Republican control of state government for more than a decade, and yet things don't get done. Now, they have used the federal excuse on several things, but now they don't even have that. So who will our Republicans blame when the priorities of conservatives aren't fulfilled, when the action items that we have given them, when the voters have given them, aren't checked off, who will they blame? And that's where you and I are going to have some real serious conversations about why the blazes we put up with it, about why the blazes we let these folks lie to us about what they believe. Because, again, understand this, the Democrats can't stop anything in Texas. You cannot blame a Democrat for killing legislation in Texas. They have tried to blame the threat of the Obama administration to not do things. That's now gone. Democrats can't stop any legislation in Texas. If a state representative or a state senator or a lieutenant governor or a governor tells you, we would have loved to have done this thing, but those mean old Democrats killed it, know that you are being lied to and treated like the simple child, because they think that you are stupid, because you have a nearly two-thirds supermajority in the Texas House and a two-thirds supermajority in the Texas Senate, and that remains unchanged. So any priority you have, any legislative goal you have that isn't done is killed by Republicans. They might want to blame the Democrats, but it's the Republicans who are in charge. The Democrats only kill things with the Republicans' assent. So you and I, it's nice to think that Republicans won, but now they have to act like they won. And you and I have to demand that they act like they won and not be captive to their own low expectations in this coming legislative session. In this coming legislative session, there is almost nothing that shouldn't be accomplished for conservatives. Look at the Republican Party platform. That's a good place to start. A whole lot of good stuff in there. There's nothing in there, almost nothing in there, that can't be accomplished by the Texas legislature if the Republicans want to govern as Republicans. Now that's a big if. And I would submit to you, unfortunately, that the Texas House is led by Republicans who don't want to act like Republicans. The Texas House is led by folks who want to run under the name Republican, but don't want to be bothered to do the things that is expected of Republicans. And you and I have to stop tolerating that. Our friends have to stop tolerating that. You and I and our friends have to stop allowing that to continue by continuing to send back those very same people. So there are four issues I want to that, in my mind, kind of exemplify this problem and also point to the opportunity that is ahead, again, over these next 2 years. If Republicans are serious about governing, and America has pretty well said, from Tyler, Texas, all the way up, we want Republicans in charge based on what Republicans have promised. Some of you have heard me say this before, but it's absolutely true. When I walk out of a meeting, I stop at a gas station because I always believe in starting a trip with a full tank of gas, no matter how far I'm going, and I buy a Dr. Pepper. I buy a Dr. Pepper because it is my absolute favorite drink. As an Aggie, I appreciate the maroon packaging, but it's the contents that matter, all right? And when I see the maroon packaging of the Dr. Pepper, there on the shelf in the refrigerator of the gas station, I know what I'm getting there. And I take it and I open it, and it should taste like Dr. Pepper. If it tastes like Pepsi, I'm a little perturbed. Indeed, I'm more than a little perturbed, because that's not, you sold me the wrong thing. The packaging lied to me. You've been lied to a lot. We've all bought things that were sold to us on a fraud, and the Texas House excels at that. The leadership there, they run with the packaging, but then they don't deliver the contents. So there are four issues that a governing Republican majority should be able to do, and there's again, another 50 that we could talk about, another 100 we could talk about that beyond that. There are 4 priorities I want to talk about. First is spending limits, limiting the growth of government, keeping government tightly controlled. Now, this is an issue that has been in the Republican Party platform for more than 20 years in Texas. This is something that 94% of Republican primary voters have supported on their ballots. This is something that the Texas Senate passed last session because beginning last legislative session, we had Dan Patrick as lieutenant governor. We finally had a lieutenant governor who wanted to govern as a conservative and as a Republican, and he had a Senate that was willing to govern as Republicans and as conservatives. They actually passed this. It was turned upside down and gutted in the Texas House. 94% of Republican primary voters say they want this. 2/3 of the Texas House are Republicans, and yet they can't do it. They refuse to. It's a statutory change, not a constitutional change. It's a statutory change. And yet they refuse to do it. They refuse to put a limitation on how fast government can grow beyond population and inflation, beyond a reasonable measure of the state's economy. Why? Because they'd actually rather be spending your money. They would rather take more and more of your money and let you deal with the consequences of it. So you and I should expect to see in a Texas legislature that is all Republican, with a Republican lieutenant governor, Republican governor, every level of government in Texas is held by Republicans, spending limits should happen. But in the same way as spending limits should happen, so also should property tax reform. State Senator Paul Betancourt from down in Houston and a bevy of other folks have made property tax reform the number one issue. In fact, Dan Patrick got elected to the Texas House on property tax reform. And it's been stymied by, not Democrats, but by Republicans. In the last legislative session, the Texas Senate came up with a fantastic property tax relief package. It was stopped by the coalition of Republicans and liberal Democrats that control the Texas House. They stopped it, they turned it upside down, they played around with it, and essentially forced a compromise that resulted. Who saw the property tax go down this year? Anyone? No. Okay. Well, so real property tax reform that both goes to the system of property taxation, but also the accountability around the property taxes. So much needs to be fixed with a system that has become confiscatory, reaching a point in which most Texans truly no longer own your own property. You know, if you think you own your own property, don't pay your taxes and see what happens. I won't do that, but you might want to try it. We have a confiscatory property tax system that has to be fixed. It has to be fixed because it is not only does it harm individuals, but it harms us economically. It harms us economically by making Texas highly unattractive to heavy manufacturing, to big industry, because they look at Texas and they see a crazy property tax system they can't afford. If you think it's difficult paying property taxes on your home, try paying it on a multi-million square foot facility with robots and lots of raw goods sitting around. It's almost impossible. And so the result of our crazy property tax system, our confiscatory property tax system, has been we do things like corporate welfare. The only way that we can bring in heavy manufacturing, bring in big industry, is for you, who's already suffering under a confiscatory property tax system, to then be taxed even more to give that money to some out-of-state corporation to convince them to move in. That's bad policy upon bad policy. If we fix the property tax system, we start having to do less of the the corporate bribery, corporate welfare stuff. The Republican legislature should be able to fix our property taxes. They should go a long way in reforming the property tax system. And again, there are a bevy of ideas floating out there that are well-established things that can be done to make the property tax system more fair, reduce the property tax burden, and make sure that we have a more competitive tax environment. Spending limits, property taxes, these are things, again, spending limits is a 94% issue with Republican primary voters. fixing property taxes is over 90% with all of humanity in Texas. Everyone gets it. This is not a Republican issue. This is everyone gets it issue with the property tax problem. The third is ethics reform. You might remember that Governor Abbott, in his State of the State address a little more than a year and a half ago, made reforming ethics for elected officials a top priority. The Texas Senate did it. Governor Patrick and the Texas Senate unanimously passed a strong ethics bill focused on the citizens, focused on the legislators, giving citizens greater confidence in who was and wasn't profiting off of their service in government. Went over to the Texas House, and fortunately you guys have someone like Matt Schaefer who sat there and said, wait a second, we need to do what the governor asked, we do what the citizens are asking for. But again, that small coalition of Republican elected officials and Democrats turned that ethics bill upside down. They gutted it, and they turned it into an abysmal joke. They turned it into something that, rather than shining a light on the elected officials, punished citizens. We can spend hours about all the goofy things they did. They would have essentially made it illegal for churches to pass a collection plate. They banned citizens from filming legislators in the Capitol. I mean, the list went on and on and on, the things the Texas House did. It wasn't just a matter of policy disagreement. It was the Texas House of Representatives, the leadership of the Texas House of Representatives, this body that is nominally controlled by 2/3 of the Republicans. It was saying, not only do we not like the idea of shining a light on government, but we hate all of you, and you're all too stupid to get it. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. It was an embarrassment. I've talked to writers at the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Times and others who all said, they didn't understand how these guys got reelected after doing that. I mean, they said, apparently your voters, the words of the nice lady from the Wall Street Journal to me, apparently their voters really are that stupid. Very sad. That's where you and I have to make sure we're spending more time educating their voters. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about spending a little bit, talked a little bit about property taxes, talked a little bit about ethics reform. Talk about some of the things, a little bit later we talk about some of the things that we should be doing with ethics reform, should be doing with property taxes. But the fourth item I want to bring to your attention that is, this is where I put on my super nerd hat. The number one driver of our state budget has been Medicaid. Right? It consumes something like 1/3 of our state budget. Medicaid and the attendant expenses with Medicaid. Now, you have two programs that are sort of, that sound a lot alike that aren't the same. Okay. There's Medicare, which is the federal insurance program for the elderly. Okay, that's Medicare. Medicaid is a program, insurance, if you will, program, government subsidy entitlement program for the indigent and the poor. All right. They are both federally mandated programs. The Medicare program happens all at the federal level. The Medicaid program is a federally mandated, state-administered program. And every state's involved in Medicaid, and states can do some things with them. And some states have used Medicaid as a backdoor way to do kind of universal health care. And you look at California, you can see the glories that it's done there to their state budget. Medicaid is a major cost driver where we're constantly ratcheting up who is considered poor and indigent, all for the purpose of expanding government. Right? Okay. Well, Medicaid is supposed to be something that the states can maneuver around in. Well, but for a long time, we have not attempted to fix Medicaid. There have been a lot of great reform proposals out there by the Texas Public Policy Foundation, the Heritage Foundation, all sorts of think tanks have recommended changes to the Medicaid program, but almost all of them require the state to go to the federal government, because we opted into this thing years ago, and say to the federal government, hey, rather than you mandating the costs, you mandating the program, block grant the dollars and let us to figure out the best way to provide for the truly poor and the truly indigent with that money. Okay? Well, we've never done it. We had that brief window back in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, 2005, when we had a situation very similar to today, that we're going to find ourselves in January, where Republicans had the White House, the Senate, the U.S. House, Republicans had the governorship, the Texas House, the Texas Senate, and all levels of government. And no one bothered to ask for this block granting. Everyone watched Medicaid growing and growing and expanding, consuming more and more of state resource, to the point now that many researchers believe that we're about a decade out from Medicaid consuming all state dollars, which means no highways, means no police, which means no education, which means nothing. Only health care. All right. Horrible situation. Everyone acknowledges it. But, we'll eventually get around to asking the Bush administration for a waiver. Yeah, but then along came an election in which Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House. And, suddenly not worth asking the Bush administration for a waiver because, the boogeyman of the week, Nancy Pelosi, will stop us. Well, so no one did it. Now we move into the Obama administration. So for 8 years, we also haven't asked for a block grant. I would suggest to you, if you want a litmus test for how serious is Governor Abbott, the Texas House, and the Texas Senate in truly reforming budgeting in the Lone Star State, who truly want to drain the swamp, to sever the inappropriate relationship between the federal bureaucracy and your wallet, is going to be whether or not Texas asks for a Medicaid waiver, to block grant the Medicaid program to Texas, and let the Texas legislature design an indigent and poor program that doesn't bankrupt the Lone Star State. If they do that, that will be a sign that we've truly moved past the era of low expectations. That will prove that we've got Republican leadership who is committed to working the way they campaign. On the other hand, if they don't, that gives us another useful data point. They've got less than 2 years to do it. The clock is ticking. Why less than 2 years? Because we have a Trump administration for 4. Yeah. May not have the U.S. House for 4. There's an election in 2 years for the Texas House. And at that point, if the U.S. House flips back Democrat, then, we won't get the Medicaid waiver. They've got a short window of opportunity to prove that they want to do something different than they've done before on behalf of taxpayers. So Medicaid block granting is a great little litmus test to use in looking at how serious the complete Republican control that we enjoy in Texas of state and federal government, just how serious that is. I would encourage you, as you're visiting with your state senators, your state reps, as you see Governor Abbott, showing up at events and things, ask about Medicaid block grant. Ask when they're going to be making that application to the Trump administration. Because that single change of block granting Medicaid, putting a control on the growth of a program that is a leviathan consuming state resources, that'll tell you all you need to know about the seriousness of Republicans in this next legislative session. There are a couple other issues, of course, that are going to be driving the conversation. Again, I would suggest that you and I should limit ourselves to the 3 or 4 things. We should wonder, what are the 3 or 4 things we just really don't care about and want them to get done? Don't do that. There's everything else should be done during this legislative session. They have control. They should use it. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Happy to answer any questions about issues coming up. About yes, ma'am. Oh, I see. You're collecting cards. I'm sorry.
If you haven't been here before, if you'll just write your questions on a card. so that I can read them, and then we'll do it that way, because that way they can,
great,
everyone can
okay.
hear it, and we'll do it. So, let's see if I can read. I would like to work, let me just get this going here. And also just a reminder, for those of you who, Mac, this goes on to our website, right? Does it? Do we keep this recorded? Because I saw some of you kind of doing what I was doing, trying to write all these points down. So we do record these, and you can go back.
Not always.
Not always, only when Matt
Good
feels
luck.
like it.
No. Only when
Joanne,
Joanne
okay.
approves it.
When Joanne
Now,
approves it.
I always have an archive copy that's available for the board members to get, and
Okay.
then
That's good to know.
whatever.
Because someone like Michael Quinn has so many good points, and I'm sitting there trying to write along, but we do deal. And also, you have is it a blog that goes, because I got one this morning on the topic of Secretary of Education. So how can people find out
Sure, we'd
your
love for folks
information?
to subscribe to our work. You can go online to empowertexans.com. We put out a weekly e-news magazine called the Texas Scorecard. We've got folks covering the legislature, covering each of the major metro areas. We're eventually working, and hopefully, to having staff down in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm having staff here in East Texas, covering local government as well. So hopefully you'll subscribe to the Texas Scorecard online. You can also get the print edition of the Texas Scorecard, which I should have brought copies of, and I didn't today. But you can but you can subscribe, and that's free. We mail that to you once a month when the legislature's out of session, and then weekly during session. So we like killing trees at Empower Texans. So you can just go online, or if you take out your little magic glowing machine, and if you will text subscribe to 313131. So go to your messaging app, 313131, and the word subscribe, and a link will come to you so you can subscribe that way too.
And after our meeting, Michael Quinn will have a class on going to your messaging app so that you can do that.
Yes, we'll see if I can do
All
that.
right, let's see what we have here for you. Do you agree that Governor Abbott's appointments, Carlos Cascos, and I'm going to get these wrong, and Keith Ingraham, and Sarah Martinez Tucker have been disappointing? Tucker's, Tucker's Common Core U.S. News, according to News report.
Yeah, well, so Governor, of course, there are a whole lot of appointments are made by governors. I think that the appointments over there are to UT. I think is Governor made a nod. Yeah, I was very disappointed in Governor Abbott's appointments to the University of Texas Board of Regents. As some of you may be aware, there's been quite a bit of controversy over the past several years looking at the University of Texas. The University of Texas had kind of decided to let itself be used as the private playground of some wealthy donors and the politically connected, where there is now overwhelming evidence that students were admitted to the university not on the basis of their academic qualifications, but on the basis of who their mommy and daddy were and who their mommy and daddy wrote checks to. That is bad. That is, look, if Baylor or SMU or some private institution, they're more than welcome to do that. You're not allowed to do that with state institutions. You're not allowed to have pay to play in our state institutions. So all this has been revealed over several years thanks to Wallace Hall, a member of the Board of Regents from Dallas. There's a great t-shirt here, I love whistleblowers, is celebrating Wallace Hall. Wallace Hall put out there, hey, look, expose these things. The Speaker of the Texas House, Joe Strauss, and his team hip deep in all of this, neck deep in all of this. And after blowing the whistle on these very corrupt practices that he actually uncovered when he uncovered some kind of financial malfeasance at UT, in which donations were being double counted and all sorts of things. They're just wrong, He then uncovered this admissions abuse stuff. After uncovering these things, Speaker Strauss and State Representative Dan Flynn from just down the road here, they led an effort to try to impeach Wallace Hall. They tried to make him go away. According to Wallace Hall, Joe Strauss called the governor of Texas and said, hey, if you get Wallace Hall to resign, we'll end all of this stuff, to which Wallace Hall said, no, I don't think so. You can go ahead and try to impeach me, and of course they didn't. So it's a mess, and it's frustrating. And so it was even more frustrating when appointments to the Board of Regents come up. Governors appoint the boards of regents to our universities, that rather than appoint more reformers to the board, instead Governor Abbott picked folks who would just kind of rubber stamp kind of the way things had been going. So hopefully Abbott will make better appointments to UT in the future. We'll see. We were very pleased with the appointments that he made to the Texas Ethics Commission. I talked earlier about ethics. One of the best ways that we could bring greater ethics to state government is to eliminate the Texas Ethics Commission. Any commission that has the name ethics in it probably isn't, and I would suggest to you that these folks most definitely are not. The Texas Ethics Commission exists to regulate speech. It exists to shut down citizens, and has been used now for a decade by the politically connected to go after their opponents. The Ethics Commission, one fellow refers to it, it should be called the Paperwork Commission. They will call you unethical for, turning in your report 2 minutes late, 2 minutes after midnight. I mean, it's just crazy. It's an insane system. We've had a lot of experience with them. We've kicked their backside in court, and we have them on the run. We've got one of the commissioners, now former commissioners, has a pending criminal complaint against him. We have filed civil rights lawsuits against the rest of them. It's a corrupt agency, a corrupt institution of government. Just a very brief background. I mean, I kind of wound up. My coffee in the truck's now kicking in.
We have more questions.
Yeah, you're wondering. The Ethics Commission was formed. All of us actually voted for the darn thing back in the early 90s, but it bears little resemblance to what you and I voted for back in the 90s. What you and I voted for was an agency that, according to the ballot and according to the state constitution, was to do two things. It was to set the per diem payment, which is, how much legislators are paid, when they're doing work down in Austin, $150 a day, $200 a day, room and board kind of payment. And then they were to recommend to voters salary changes for the legislature, because we set the legislators' salaries in the state constitution. Well, they do a pretty good job, the Ethics Commission, of setting per diems. They have never recommended a pay raise, which is probably smart because we'd all vote no. But what they decided to do, starting about 15 years ago, although you talk to the folks who formed it, and this is what they wanted to do all along, was use the Ethics Commission as a way to silence citizens, use the Ethics Commission as a way to regulate speech. In fact, the former chairman of the Ethics Commission said in a hearing involving me that, we really should be regulating speech. Every citizen should be subject to our rules. It's just crazy. An agency that was ostensibly created to deal with the legislature now focuses on citizenry. Alice Linehan, I'm sure many of you know that name, one of the Crusaders, kind of unveiled Common Core as she was traveling around the state talking about the perils of Common Core. She wore out the tires on her car. She took her car in. She took a picture of the car, put it on her Facebook page, and said, "Oh, look, driving around the state, fighting against Common Core has forced me to get a new set of tires." Well, a member of the State Board of Education, also from this part of the world, Thomas Ratliff, who is evil and not coming back, fortunately, Thomas Ratliff, he filed an ethics complaint against her because she was buying new tires. That means she'd spent too much money, and therefore she needed to be found unethical by the Ethics Commission. We were ringing them through the court so much they eventually threw that out. But that's where the Ethics Commission wants to be. So recently there were 2 appointments to the commission come up. Once appointed, you stay on. You can't get these guys off of it. It's an independent agency. So Governor Abbott had 2 appointments and made 2 very good appointments to the Ethics Commission. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag there.
All right, we had 3.
Long-winded answer to
We
whatever
had
that
3
great
of
question
these,
was.
and these may produce another long-winded
Yeah.
answer.
I'll try not to, sorry.
How do we get the speaker out of that office? Speaker of the House, update please on Strauss, and what is the possibility of getting rid of Joe Strauss? We have 3 of those.
Look, I mean, at the I would suggest to you right now, and in all candor, just between us girls, since nobody's recording or anything, I would say I would put the likelihood pretty low. I'm not sure there is enough testicular fortitude or calcium in the backbone of Republican House members to do anything about it. I mean, I wish I was more. I wish I could have something more cheery to say. But you know, there's not. I mean,
Well, you
I mean,
did say-
there's some good guys who want to fight, but you know, they all want to be invited to Christmas parties. They all know on December 3rd, Saturday, December 3rd, we're hosting an event celebrating citizen leaders. Matt Schaefer's going to have a table there. By the way, Matt doesn't have many friends. He's going to have, besides himself, I don't know if his lovely bride will go out in public with him, but he's got 9 seats at his table, and he would love to have 9 of you join him there at our gala in Irving. So see Mr. Schaefer. Keep him company, although I guess they're all by himself, and that's very sad. So, okay, yeah. But no, so you know, on December 3rd, though, you know, Joe Strauss is having his little winter party for the legislature on that afternoon, early afternoon, and you know, everybody wants to go down and get their picture taken with, you know, I guess Joe Strauss dressed as Santa Claus or something, I don't know. You know, that's just kind of
It's
the
a
way the
scary
system
thought.
works, where you can, you know, drag a bag behind you and pick up money from lobbyists, and you know, everyone wants to be invited to cocktail parties, everyone wants to be, you know, given all the nice little baubles, that sort of thing. And so, you know, challenging the speaker, ooh, that's scary. No one's died yet. You know, I'm not sure it's really scary. But too many of the guys just feel like, oh, well, you know, I just want to get along. No, I think we just saw a national election built around the premise that Americans are tired of folks who get along. You know, we need a little more controversy. We need a little more you know, dedication to principles and a little less congeniality, because it's all fake anyway. They all hate each other. You know, be honest, man up.
Well, I think this really follows up with that. Citizen apathy is the major stumbling block, in my opinion. Will you comment on this?
I think that there has been a real shift in citizen engagement over the past over the past decade. You're seeing more and more citizens involved, getting involved and engaged. Like, I mean, groups like this. You know, and man, Joanne is going. Don't show her this video. Lose this video, because what I'm about to say, y'all aren't unique. Sorry. There are lots of groups like this, okay, where, you know, folks getting together to discuss issues, to discuss what's going on in local government, to discuss this. You know, I mean, there are lots of these things happening, and these things didn't exist a decade ago. This didn't exist a decade ago. You know, a decade ago, I can tell you absolutely, because I've seen the polling data, no one in Texas knew who the Speaker of the Texas House was. Today, to his chagrin, people do. You know, people didn't. You know, we were seeing increasing participation in city council races and school board races. People are getting more engaged. Is it where I want it? No. Is it where you want it? No. But it's better than it was. I think we always have to take that moment to go, oh, yeah, you know, it's, we allow ourselves as humans to look back and think the past was always better than the present. It's actually not true. The past really wasn't better than the present. You know, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams accused each other of the most horrific, nasty, terrible things you can imagine two human beings saying about each other.
It just wasn't on Facebook.
It just was on Facebook, you know, and so it's, you know, so things are kind of, human nature is kind of human nature. You don't have 3-year-olds dying of polio. You know, we don't. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. And certainly when it comes to citizen engagement, we see far more folks passionately involved, passionately engaged at all levels of government than certainly in the 25 years as a journalist that I've been tracking engagement in government. I would show up at city council meetings in Dallas, I'd show up at city council meetings where literally the only person in the audience would be me. Today, you don't have that in any city council in the state, where you have, in big and small, you'll have at least 2 or 3 people who show up all the time. That's improvement.
That's great. Do you think there is sufficient political will in Austin to abolish the Texas franchise tax?
There should be. Look, certainly we've got a number of folks who just like taxes. The franchise tax, that's the tax that businesses pay. It's called the gross margins tax. Is kind of the shorthand for it. Finally some truth in government advertising, because it is gross. This is a highly inefficient tax. The national group of CPAs refers to it as an income tax, because the way it's calculated, it is an income tax on business. But it's a more perverse kind of income tax, because you're paying this tax whether you make a profit or not. At least with kind of the federal version of the income tax, if you don't make a profit, you don't get taxed. Here, they're just taxing you on the income, on money flowing in, with a few things to lob off. It's an inefficient tax. Most businesses find they spend more money complying with it than what the tax burden is. In fact, many businesses who find themselves kind of at the margins of the thresholds find themselves having to spend a lot of money to only then find they don't have a tax liability. That is almost the textbook definition of an inefficient tax, one in which it's more expensive to administer, more expensive to comply with than the state actually gets out. It's a diminishing source. If you've got a good enough CPA and you've got a couple of good lawyers, you ain't paying the tax. It's a nuisance tax in a lot of ways, and it should be abolished. On the other hand, the franchise tax is now linked to school finance, and as you know, anything you do for or to the children is sacrosanct, and therefore it can't be touched. And so, there's a lot of folks who don't want to touch it because, oh no, that'll hurt the children. Grow up.
Right. We had a lot of questions, so I'm going in order, so we'll try and get to everyone's, but let me just try and roll through these. Daylight savings time. Why not just spring forward 30 minutes next spring and leave it there? Yes. Was that yours, Matt?
Yes. Look, there was a great study that was done in the, I want to say it was during the Bush administration. I want to say it was actually done by one of the aides in the Bush administration. They found that this thing is inefficient. This is a cost driver. Certainly I think you could have made a fantastic case for daylight savings time and all that stuff when we were an agrarian society. We're not an agrarian society anymore. In fact, some of the strongest opponents of daylight savings time, I've been surprised to learn over the years, actually are professional farmers and ranchers, because, hey, their alarm clock's going off early now, but the cow doesn't want to be milked yet. The cow actually wants another hour of sleep. It's crazy. Me too. So it's actually not very efficient from it was efficient when you didn't have these things.
Right. Or walking to school.
So you need more light coming into the room and that sort of thing. So it's an anachronism. It's like so many things that we do in government where it made sense as a tool, and at some point it became a principle, and that's silly. It's a tool.
Just side note, we have a set of lost keys in the kitchen, so if you go to leave, head for the kitchen if you can't get in your car. I'm going to try.
What kind of car do they were?
I know. Was it a good one? It's good. I'm going to think I can get all this. What is your entity doing to make sure that elected officials are transparent. Are you calling them out? And keep in mind that we just busted Hillary, as well as a millennial who was a Republican running for office. He lied about something, the SMU matter? Yeah.
Yeah, so,
You have good handwriting, I'm just
yeah, so, look, I'm mostly dumb as a brick. I've got some pretty smart people who work with me. But the one thing that I think that we do well, there are a lot of things we don't do well at all. The one thing I think we do very well is this idea of exposing the delta between what a politician says and what they do. Because that's the important thing. Look, I'm fine with guys like Bernie Sanders. I'd never vote for him, but I have a lot of respect for a man who says what he believes and then acts on it. Now, where Bernie Sanders got himself in a lot of trouble was he kind of sold himself out to get his campaign debt taken care of by endorsing Hillary Clinton, so he's got a lot of supporters staying on what is otherwise a pretty consistent record by someone like Bernie Sanders. And he's wrong, but at least he's honest. The problem that we have in our body politic are politicians who will tell you A and go do Z, And like all of us in life, I tell you L, but I do M. Okay, there's that little delta. It's the growing delta. The ideal for a moral person is to say you're going to do A and you do A, right? That's the ideal. We all get it. With our politicians, with our employees, our public servants, we need about the business of reducing the delta. And that's where my organization ends up getting shot at a lot by the people in power, is because we do say, look, he told you he was going to vote this way, and he voted that way. And they don't like that. Every politician is the second coming of Ronald Reagan. Everyone running as a Republican, is the most conservative person ever. Right up until the moment you take 10 minutes and look at the House Journal or the Senate Journal, and you look at how they voted. And now suddenly they look a whole lot more like Walter Mondale than they do Ronald Reagan. And that's where we try to expose it. Again, from the citizen engagement, there was the race this year. The guy running who had claimed he had graduated from college, and he hadn't. Look, that was uncovered by human beings. Uncovered that, citizens uncovered that. So when we're talking about citizen engagement, that affected things. This is a kid who was on track. The leadership wanted him and everything else, and boom, he was derailed. Not by the professional political class. Wasn't derailed by the by the mainstream media. He was derailed by citizens who took their little magic glowing box and they typed in some stuff. Went, hey, wait a second, 1 and 1 didn't equal 2 here. When citizens get involved, citizens win.
That's good. I'm going to read both of these together because I think you can work them in. In Texas, the vote was 53% Trump, 43% Clinton. Should that concern us? And then followed up with, what is your assessment of the outcome of Texas state elections, particularly Texas House and State Senate, and that is more or less conservative?
So Trump was, like every candidate, not the ideal candidate. The ideal candidate does not exist, has never existed, will never exist. Sorry to deflate you, go hide under your bed, until Christ comes. The ideal candidate won't ever be on your ballot. Okay. So Trump, like every candidate, had his particular flaws, and some of that was reflected in Trump's vote totals. In a lot of counties, Mr. Trump underperformed the straight Republican vote, which means that Republicans hit straight Republican and they did a variance on the presidency. Were they voting for Hillary? Well, apparently not. Were they voting for Gary Johnson or writing in Eric McMillan or somebody else, who knows? Those numbers, there were a whole lot of people who just said, I'm just skipping the presidential column, and then they voted on down the ballot. That is what it is, and that's just, that is a statement of knowable fact, right? I don't think it is worrying so much in that Hillary Clinton got kind of what we all would have expected, the Democrat running for president in an open seat election where there is no incumbent in the White House. A Democrat getting 43% in Texas? Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm not going to debate that too much. Hillary Clinton, a better candidate than Wendy Davis, who hit kind of the low mark for just dumb as a brick candidate, So, okay, I guess she didn't do as bad as Wendy Davis, but she did kind of what every other Democrat does. So for Donald Trump's numbers then are kind of more a reflection on Trump specifically, and whatever concerns people may or may not have had about him. And look, some are legitimate, some not legitimate. But I think though that I wouldn't read too much into that other than look, Donald Trump has no record, and he's got heavens only knows the man has a record of all sorts of stuff out there. But in terms of governing record, he doesn't have a governor who can go back and say, oh, when he was on the Petoskey City Council, he voted to do whatever. All those the things we kind of expect, which I think contributed to folks being less than comfortable with voting for Donald Trump. And then some of the other stuff, don't have to recount. Give him 48 hours in office, and now he's got a record, and now we'll see what was founded, what was unfounded. And I suspect that, should Donald Trump run for re-election, and who knows? I spent an hour with the guy back in June in a private meeting, and I don't know if he'll run again. No one knows if he'll run again. He'll decide that in, I don't know, a week from now or something. But if he's on the ballot, I suspect that he does much better in re-election than he did first time around in Texas. I suspect he kind of floats back to the Republican norm in Texas, would be my guess. The House race, there was some spillover in the House races where where Republicans lost 5 seats, really only 4 seats of the Texas House. Went from nominally 99 Republicans down to a 94, but one of those guys had been elected in a special election in a seat. It was a Democrat seat, and this fellow had never actually served in the legislature. He'd just been elected to the legislature because of our kind of the way our cycles work. So he did not win. So I don't really count him that much. He probably shouldn't have won the first time, quite frankly, just from the way the districts are drawn. Legislators can't balance budgets to save their lives. They can draw lines to get Republicans and Democrats where they want them. They can do that very, very well. Can't cut your taxes. They can get themselves reelected with their drawing skills. They can draw better than any 3-year-old in a preschool anywhere in America. So they are there. Now, so you've got those other 4. There were folks with problems. Kenneth Sheets, a Republican from Dallas County, a guy who at one point was a pretty strong conservative, who kind of decided at some point, to heck with you conservatives, and he started wanting to make kissy faces at the House leadership. He's in a kind of a tight district, so guess what? A lot of the conservatives in the district said, you don't like us? Fine. Get elected without us. And he found, oops, he couldn't. And I think that that kind of was the same kind of thing we saw. Not a single conservative of the real conservatives, that subset of Republicans, not a single one of them lost their election. They all won. They all won pretty handedly, in fact. Even in districts like Matt Rinaldi, state representative, also from Dallas County, Hillary Clinton won in his district by 8 points. Hillary Clinton actually won his district, but he won his race. And a big chunk of that, and Matt Rinaldi is, I think Mr. Schaefer would agree, he's one of the, he and Schaefer and Stickland and a couple others, they kind of vie for who is the most conservative guy, whatever that may or may not mean. So he's very unapologetic about it. He explains himself. He talks to his constituents. He bebops around his district all the time, talking to people who disagree with him, and then they vote for him. People are looking for honesty. People are looking for integrity. People are looking for candidates who will say and do the same thing. That's what they're looking for. And so, Ken of the Sheets gets to become the nice lesson that good, honest Republican boys and girls can share in the future about how when you start lying to your constituents, when you start ignoring your constituents, they will do the same. And maybe it'll be a good cautionary tale. Now, no one's life is a waste. It's just that some people get to be a bad example.
Just a couple of announcements in case you need to leave, and then we'll just wrap up with a couple of questions. Just check with the kitchen if you need a Subway. They discount those at the end, so you can take a couple home. Remember to vote with the little pieces of paper. There's a basket back there. Biff will hold up the basket, and then the money for the room. A is $6. You get pizza and a drink. B is we bring our own potluck, and everybody brings something. So A or B, and please do that. Otherwise, it will be a dictatorship, and I will decide. Miss Ethel just wanted to announce, and you can see Miss Ethel in the back for more information, that we're going to be, there's a feeding on Thanksgiving at the Boys and Girls Club, and so you can ask her for details on that. And just a reminder that we have these for $10 for your stocking stuffers, and let me roll two more at you. Also, this was from Miss Ethel, but I'll give you this information. She said she'd like to work with your watchdog coordinator, Jose.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
On behalf of the failing schools in the Tyler ISD, will you give her his contact number? So I'll pass that along to you. She would like to work with him. Was Carlos Casco's a good choice for the Texas for the Texas Secretary of State? I think I got all that up. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see for sure. I think there's a whole lot of folks who are a little frustrated with the way the Secretary of State's office has kind of vacillated around some of these questions regarding election fraud and some of the abuses we've seen out there. Look, ultimately though, that is only a part of his job. He also manages all of the corporation registrations and all this other kind of stuff. That's a portion of his job. I would suggest to you though that everyone is hampered by their job description in terms of how good of a job they do at times. Texas has done a very bad job of putting teeth in our election law. Why does no one pursue election fraud? Because ain't much consequence if you do it, and so as a result, if you're a hotshot young ADA, or if you're a want to go change the world crusading prosecutor, and there's election fraud, but it doesn't really amount to much. I'm going to spend a whole lot of time and energy going after it, but there's no real consequence. We've kind of set in place all these weird things that make it difficult to prove, and on and on and on. Who's at fault? I mean, they're all at fault. There's a whole lot of fault to go around. But as with all things involving fault in governance, the first fault rests with you and me. It's easy for us to blame the Secretary of State, or to blame, the insufficiently dogged prosecutor. But first, it has to be you and me, that you and I have not asked and demanded and grabbed our elected officials by the lapels and shake them until their ears bleed. That we want our election laws to have teeth in them, so that when a vote is stolen, it is treated as severely as when my car is stolen, when my when my business is blown up or whatever. I mean, this is we should consider the ballot box sacred, but currently, in terms of consequences for problems, we treat it like it's a kid stealing a jelly bean from a jelly bean factory. I mean, so we just kind of whatever, that kind of thing. So we've got to fix that. You fix that, and suddenly, I think you might see then a shifting attitude, from the top all the way down, of the way folks approach going after these problems at the ballot box.
Call the cops and file a police report.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as citizens, you know, if we see the malfeasance, see the problems, we should always act, regardless of what the consequences may be. But again, I think there's a lot at stake there, and putting teeth into the election code. We saw it in Hill County, where there was this crazy, double voting, and I would argue there was probably not malfeasance; it was just ineptitude. But look, when ineptitude, long-standing, long-allowed ineptitude, is where fraud, takes hold. Tarrant County. Where we have learned in my office, Metroplex, the first report there in Tarrant County on this vote harvesting and stealing thousands of votes over several years. We're a state rep race we're almost certain was flipped because of it, and a lot of local elections stolen because of it. Those are real consequences of that. And we can all chuckle, oh, well, yeah, that's in Tarrant County, and oh, that's just their water district. Who cares about that? That's billions of dollars. That's real people's lives. We should care a lot about it. And if it happens there, and they're allowed to get away with it in Hill County and Tarrant County, it ain't long before somebody in Smith County goes, oh, well, hey, I can do that too, apparently. Never underestimate the value of a bad example taking root.
Last question, and it's a Bob Brewer question, so if you don't get it, see Bob afterwards. And our wonderful speakers are always so good at staying afterwards, so if a question didn't get asked, or you want to haunt them just a little bit more, please see Michael Quinn afterwards. And again, where they can get your information, because I get it and I love it. So tell them one more time.
Yeah, let folks visit empowertexans.com, empowertexans.com. You can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Instagram. All those kind of places you can find us. We'd love for you to subscribe to our work, to check out what we do.
And do you do
in our newspaper. Which you can go to the website and you can subscribe to the newspaper.
I like that. I read that. Last question from Bob. Would you consider recognizing the Sons of the American Revolution State Oratory Champion at your 10th anniversary on December 3rd? How's that for putting you on the spot for the last one?
Yeah, appreciate it. Always nice to be on the spot. We all of our awards we do through a nomination process that starts back in the early fall. Certainly, for our next year's awards, we'd love to have everyone nominate people you think are good leaders, good advocates. Submit them there. That's kind of the way our process
Actually, I did see it
works.
come out, so it's very well publicized that people can put
Yes,
in.
yeah.
I did see that
Yeah,
nominated.
we had almost 500 recommendations. Now, a lot of those were duplicates. In all fairness, all those were duplicates. It's actually pretty amazing. The nice. I'm not supposed to say any names because those are big. Those are kind of part of the surprise, right, of the event. But some of these folks who, oh yeah, man, I see that guy everywhere. And then you get a nomination come in from some, they never ask for credit, never wears a name tag, that kind of stuff. But it's pretty cool when you see people in the community say, this person is fighting for government, for good government and liberty and citizen engagement. So that's very exciting. So we, at our gala, just so you can show what we do, we don't give awards to elected officials. We don't hand out baubles and trinkets to them. We give swords to citizen leaders. In the grand tradition of the Army, that's the way you recognize the guy who's on the field leading the charge, right? These aren't the people standing in the back, in the tent wearing the cleanly, freshly pressed uniform. These are the people with dirt on their hands. That's who we like to recognize. So, yeah.
We just want to thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Michael Quinn. We
Appreciate it.
always appreciate it. And we thank you all for being here again.